welcome back to Chilling Ice Cold Stories. This is a podcast with real chilling stories, the most scariest of scary, eeriest of eerie, spookiest of spooky, and more bloody than bloody. These stories are frightening and different. Come listen in on some scary stories that may or may not cause insomnia. Welcome. Okay, so welcome. Our first story is from Reddit user Excrement Cranium. This is titled Ouija Board Knocks Back. In high school, my friends and I were messing around with a Ouija board one night. We had done it before and nothing remarkable had ever happened. We usually did it to try and scare each other or our girlfriends. We all thought it was a joke. That night, there was no one else home except the 7 of us, and we were all together around the board. One of the girls there wanted to try it. She had never done it before. This time was different. The board misspelled some of the words the same way every time. It gave answers that seemed really historically accurate for our town, things we neither knew or cared about. Long story short, the spirit claimed it was a 10-year-old boy who had died on the property in the 1800s and was buried there, too, in an unmarked grave. My friend's house was on a farm in the edge of town. So I guess that was where the unmarked grave was, because it says was buried there, too, in an unmarked grave. And then, in parentheses, my friend's house was on a farm in the edge of town. We were all a little freaked out because the board had never been so detailed and consistent. However, we were skeptical and we were all assuming one of us was trying to scare the rest. Finally, my friend asked if the spirit could do something to prove he was there with us. It went to yes and then spelled out knock. Knock. Then the planchette stopped moving. We just all stared at it silently, and then there was a rap, 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 rap on the window next to us. The lights were on the outside, and there was absolutely no one out there. We never touched that beep board again. Wow. So that story from Reddit user Excrement Cranium, wow, that is literally crazy. Wow. I have heard my mother's one boyfriend, who she was dating for a few years, he told me that the kind of same thing happened to him. They were all playing the Ouija board, and basically they were done playing it, and the Ouija thing came in. It said on the board, "I'm going to kill you." And a few weeks later, her boyfriend's friend, which was a girl, she was killed and murdered, and they don't know who it did it or why. And they said that it wasn't normal. It wasn't like there was no weapon, and it was an unsolved case. Very spiritual, if you ask me. So I'm going to read another story here about a Ouija board. This is Reddit user Elvis Rabbit from 5 years ago. My father tells a story of when he was a young man that involves a Ouija board. An uncle of his died in a farming accident, and no one got to say goodbye. The parents all went to the funeral, and a lot of the children were left together at my grandfather's house because they were too young to go to a funeral. My dad said one of his cousins had brought a Ouija board to kill some time. Some of the older cousins were playing around with it, asking stupid questions, and just messing around. Then, one of them said something along the lines of, We've never got to say goodbye to our uncle. Would it be possible for us to speak with him?" Then, mostly unnoticed, the front door of the house opened. That gives me chills. And that uncle walked in and hung his jacket on the hook by the door. Then one of my dad's sisters saw him and screamed, causing them all to take their hands off the board, and he disintegrated. My father remembers seeing him for a moment, but before he disintegrated. His siblings and cousins who were there all back up this story. Spooky stuff. And then a Reddit user, which is now deleted, said, "Did you say goodbye?" And if you guys are unrecognizing or you don't know on the Ouija board, you have to say goodbye and let the planchette go to goodbye. I have never played the Ouija board. I made my own homemade one, and I think it's just something that I'm not going to ever do. Because in my personal opinion, it's very I can't say this. Satanic or satanic. There we go. Satanic. Very like a ritual or like a cult to the devil. So I will never play the Ouija board, but it's just a very creepy story. Wow. So, sharing one more story here that I have. This one is called Phantom Alarms. Oh my gosh. What is this? This is a long one, guys. Okay. This is from Reddit user 666_number of the beast. This was 5 years ago. Sorry if you hear my dog. He is drinking some water. You can hear him. Okay, Reddit user 666_number of the beast shared this story about strange occurrences in their dad's home. This is a pretty long story, guys, so let's get ready. When I was in high school, I had a lot of these experiences. At my house, my dad lived in at the time. It was really old, built in the early 1800s. There were plenty of times I'd be sitting in the living room and distinctly hear the cabinets opening and closing in the kitchen. It was just me and my dad that lived in the house, and you could clearly see when his bedroom door was shut and he was asleep, but still hear it. Normally, my dad worked 7 to 3, but occasionally worked a PM or overnight shift. One night, he was working until 11 o'clock. I was 17 at the time. Around 8 or so, I'm sitting in my room playing Borderlands and think I hear footsteps coming from the living room, which was adjacent to my bedroom. And assuming my dad's home early, go back to playing Borderlands. I keep hearing the steps, so I pause the game and listen. And the footsteps are just slowly pacing back and forth between the living room and the kitchen in a steady rhythm. I laid in bed, scared shitless, and actually counted the steps. Every time it took 15 paces to the living room, and then 15 back to the kitchen. Needless to say, I did not sleep that night. Had another situation at my mom's house about 2 years prior to this. Out of nowhere, my alarm clock would go off at midnight every night. I assumed it was busted and got rid of it. Fast forward 2 years, my mom gets another brand new alarm clock for my room, also when I was 17. Suddenly, alarm goes off at midnight. I thought nothing of it. Turned it off. Happened again the next night, and then my sister pointed out the old one I had that did it. So I checked and made sure no alarms were set, double-checked at 11:56. Sure enough, 4 minutes later, my alarm goes off. Freaked out, I threw it out. That next night was my dad's night to have me. I had a buddy of mine over, and my dad was working that night. He left for work around 2 a.m., and my friend had brought over an iPod dock to listen to music on. Didn't have the clock set or anything. My friend knew nothing of the last couple nights, so I knew he wasn't just messing around with me. About 2 minutes after my dad leaves, we hear an alarm clock coming from my room. I went in, And you know how if you just plug in a clock without setting it, the numbers just blink on and off? Well, it was doing that. As soon as I picked it up, the clock set itself to 12 o'clock and then turned off by itself. So yeah, frickin' paranormal crap. I'm not religious at all, but I'm 100% convinced that it happens. Whoa. That is like a 3-in-1 spooky. Oh my gosh. That is like, oh my gosh. That's so creepy. Like, that gives me chills. So the alarm, the iPod dock, I don't know if it was plugged in, but I think it was. And he went in, and it was just blinking. It wasn't even set. And then as soon as he picked up the clock, it turned itself to 12 o'clock. What the heck? That's so crazy. Wow. Well, I thank you guys for listening in to Chilling Ice Cold Stories, where you get the most scary of scary, eeriest of eerie, spookiest of spooky, and most bloodier than bloody. These stories, again, are frightening and different, and you just listen to some scary ones. In my next episode, I'll have some more spooky, chilling, ice cold stories. So I'll see you in the next episode. Have a good time. Don't get too scared on Chilling Ice Cold Stories.